The officer laughed. Until the woman in uniform took off her hat. She's lost. The officer chuckled, brushing crumbs off his badge like he was doing a favor to the wind. She's in the wrong place. Ma'am, you hearing me? He said, louder, this time smirking as he blocked the woman's path with one boot planted firm on the sidewalk like he owned the ground beneath it. But the woman in the gray uniform didn't flinch. She stood still, one hand on her chest, the other carrying a folded flag, her shoulders straight as the steel spine of the monument behind her. Her hat shadowed her eyes. Her silence wasn't confusion. It was defiance wrapped in discipline. The laughter in his throat faded, and fast. Just moments earlier, downtown Cincinnati had paused, fountains frozen mid-arc, business suits slowing to whispers, because the procession had begun. A line of veterans in ceremonial uniform had gathered on the Capitol steps to honor a retired Marine, not a politician, not a general. Just a man who'd carried too much in silence. People had shown up not because they knew him, but because they respected what he'd lived through. Then came her. She wasn't late. She was deliberate. Her name was Alyssa Green. She didn't march. She moved like a final note held just long enough to be felt. No escort, no decoration, just her pressed uniform and the soft gleam of a service badge tucked near her heart. And yet, she wasn't welcomed. Because when Officer Craig Hinton saw her approach the service line, he didn't see a soldier. He saw someone he assumed didn't belong. "You'll need to step aside," he said louder, the mocking tone thickening, attracting stares from those nearby. "This ain't the time for parades." Still, Alyssa didn't move. Her silence became heavier than any voice, and with the care of someone opening a sacred truth, she raised her hand and took off her hat. Gasps rippled, because what they saw wasn't just rank, it was history. The Medal of Valor glinted beneath her collar. The ribbon of the Silver Star peeked from her breast pocket, and just below it, the scar. The same scar from the mission no one talked about. The rescue the Pentagon kept classified, the one they said was a suicide run, until she walked out of the smoke carrying 6 wounded soldiers and the flag they wouldn't let fall. Officer. Hinton's jaw clenched. Not because he understood what he'd done, but because the crowd around them suddenly stood taller. Not for him, but for her. The church bells echoed faintly through the plaza, calling hearts to silence. But Officer Hinton's voice cracked across the space like a whip. "You think wearing a uniform gives you power here?" he barked, stepping forward, finger raised. "This isn't a parade ground. Step back or get detained." People turned. The air around them stiffened like it knew something sacred was being bruised. Alyssa didn't blink. Her hand didn't even twitch. She just stood there, still holding the flag. For her, this wasn't confrontation. It was memory. And the moment was already deeper than the badge in front of her. Beside the marble steps, a boy in a Cub Scout uniform tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Why's he yelling at her?" he asked. The mother pulled him closer. Her lips tightened. Around them, guests who had come to pay respects now held their breath. Black suits, dress blues, old veterans with medals clinking softly against their coats. No one moved, not out of fear, but because they'd been taught. One thing above all in the service: when someone bears the flag, you do not speak over it. Officer Hinton had never served. That much was now obvious. Alyssa's eyes scanned the faces. She wasn't searching for help. She was measuring the temperature of truth. The silence from those around her wasn't cowardice. It was the weight of collective restraint. But in that weight, something cracked, an invisible fracture in the reverence of the day. Because this was not just disrespect. It was a contamination of dignity, a desecration of a space meant for closure. not cruelty, for grief, not grievance. The moment stretched. The color guard across the plaza had stopped mid-march, waiting. The flag bearers held their posts but looked uncertain. A chaplain who had just stepped out of the cathedral doors paused, then slowly walked forward. His white robe whispered against the stone floor, hands raised, not in protest, but as a bridge. "Officer," he said softly, "this woman has clearance beyond what you can comprehend. This is her ceremony." But Hinton's smirk returned. He gestured to his belt. "She's got no badge. She's got no escort. I don't care what fairy tale she's selling." Behind him, the radio, on his chest, crackled. A voice came through, thin but firm. "Unit 5, step down. That's a decorated major." Hinton didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on Alyssa. "Anyone can play dress-up," he muttered. And just like that, he reached for her shoulder. A collective gasp swallowed the plaza. His hand, aimed to shove her back, never landed. Because Alyssa didn't raise her arms, she didn't recoil. She simply turned, slow and sharp, and revealed the plaque clipped inside her coat pocket. It wasn't plastic. It was forged from black steel, and across it read, U.S. Army, Retired Commander, Operations Black Lance. The color drained from Hinton's face. In that instant, the chaplain turned fully toward the crowd and lifted his voice. "Let the service begin. Honor stands here, and it's not wearing a badge." Somewhere in the crowd, a hand began to clap. But it wasn't applause. It was rhythm. Slow, firm, steady. Not celebration, reckoning. Others joined. The claps grew louder. Not for entertainment, but as protest. A drumbeat for justice. Alyssa turned to face the casket. She stepped past Hinton like he didn't exist, because in her world of service, men like him were never part of the mission. They were obstacles to be endured. And as she laid the flag beside the fallen soldier's resting place, her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from fury barely contained. Not because she had been stopped, but because she knew how many others never made it past the boots. Alyssa didn't flinch. As the chaplain's voice echoed behind her and the clapping beat faded into a hush, she stood over the coffin, every inch of her frame telling a story Officer Hinton had never asked to know. Her coat hung heavy, weighted not just by medals, but by what they meant. Each one was earned in places where the sky bled smoke and silence came only after the screaming stopped. Somalia, Fallujah, Kandahar. She had been everywhere the headlines had moved on from, and still, here, on home soil, she had to prove. She belonged? The camera crews weren't supposed to be there. But someone had started filming when Hinton grabbed her shoulder. A young woman with long brown braids, streaming on social media, whispered, "That's Major Alyssa Grant. She's the Grant." The words moved like a ripple through the mourners. First a murmur, then a wave. Because once people knew who she was, the former commander of Operation Black Lance, the woman who had pulled 12 soldiers out of a burning vehicle under Taliban fire, they realized this wasn't just disrespect. It was sacrilege, and Hinton had spat on a legend. The officer still stood stiff, trying to hold posture. But the shift had happened. His voice, once booming with false confidence, now shook faintly at the edges. A man approached from the far end of the courtyard, fast but composed. Commander Logan Myers, Department of Defense Liaison. "Step away from her," he told Hinton, flashing credentials. "This woman reports to no one here but God, and maybe not even him." His voice was flat, final. Hinton looked around for support, but no one moved, not even his own partner. Silence, again, but this time it wasn't peace, it was judgment. The coffin was lowered slowly. Bugles played. The service resumed. But something had shifted in the bones of the day. Alyssa remained standing, not because she was resisting authority, but because she was authority. One earned, through blood, loss, and sacrifice. Her presence wasn't symbolic, it was necessary. She'd been the commander of the very man being laid to rest, and she had come not out of protocol, but promise. She had told his mother, on the worst day of her life, that her son would never be forgotten. And Alyssa had meant it, after the burial. Logan walked with her across the grass toward the parked cars. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Alyssa didn't answer immediately. Her eyes drifted back to the funeral site, now calm again. "I've faced snipers with less arrogance," she finally said. Logan chuckled grimly. "He'll be dealt with. Trust me." Alyssa nodded once. "This isn't about him. It's about how many like him wear that badge thinking it's armor for ego." Logan glanced sideways. "You gonna stay quiet about it?" Alyssa stopped walking. "Logan, they just filmed a cop laying hands on a war hero. What do you think happens? Next? It should have ended there. The burial, the salute, the silence. But trauma never ends quietly. It always echoes." Alyssa had just reached her black sedan when Officer Hinton, red-faced and trembling with rage, shoved past a group of mourners and slammed his hand on the rear door. "You think this is over?" he barked, spittle flying. "You think a couple stars on your jacket make you untouchable?" His hand reached for his belt, just for a second. But it was enough. Alyssa didn't move. She didn't have to. 3 Marines in full dress turned at once, stepping between them. The silence cracked into outrage. Phones came up like a synchronized movement. Guests who had stayed respectfully in the background now surged forward. One woman screamed, "Are you insane? She's a decorated general!" A man in uniform shouted, "Get your hands off her car!" But Hinton was beyond reason. His badge became a shield, his anger a weapon. "This is private property. I don't care who she is," he growled. "She's not above the law." Alyssa, from behind the line of uniforms now surrounding her, spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're right. No one is. That includes you." Then came the final straw, the handcuffs. Hinton pulled them out, not for Alyssa, but for the Marine who had stepped forward first. A young sergeant named Caleb Torres, 27 years old, just back from his 3rd deployment. He raised his hands peacefully. "Sir, you're escalating a situation that doesn't exist." Hinton ignored him. "You're interfering with a federal officer." The clink of metal against Caleb's wrist sent a chill through everyone. Even the chaplain gasped. It was a military funeral, on federal land, and an officer was arresting an active-duty Marine for defending his general. That's when the lieutenant governor arrived. No press, no fanfare, just a single black SUV pulling up fast. Out stepped Reagan, Douglas suit pressed, expression grim. She'd received a call from one of the state senators present at the funeral. "Let me guess," she said, eyes scanning the scene. "He's the one in the cuffs? And that," she pointed at Hinton, "is the one doing it?" No one answered. They didn't have to. She walked up slowly and showed her badge, not as a politician, but as an attorney with jurisdiction over the grounds. "Release him," she ordered. "Now." Hinton hesitated. His hands didn't move. Then, finally, the cuffs clicked open and dropped to the ground. Caleb stepped back, rubbing his wrist. Alyssa didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her silence was louder than any courtroom. Reagan turned to Hinton. "Your actions today are being recorded, not just on these phones, but by the state attorney's office. You'll be hearing from us soon." Hinton's face turned pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The line had been crossed. And now, accountability had entered the building. By the time dusk touched the cemetery's horizon, the videos had already escaped. 20 seconds here, 40 seconds there. enough to show the handcuffs snapping onto a Marine's wrist, while a funeral flag flapped in the wind. Enough to see a white officer pointing in the face of a black female general, unmoved by her stars. By midnight, funeral arrest trended nationwide. By dawn, it was the lead story on every major outlet. And by breakfast, a nation that rarely agreed on anything found itself asking the same question: what just happened at that cemetery? Newsrooms scrambled. Analysts leaned in. A well-respected MSNBC host opened with, "A funeral was supposed to be sacred. Instead, it became a crime scene. Not because of protesters, not because of chaos, but because of unchecked power." CNN showed a split screen. On one side, Alyssa Monroe, eyes calm, back straight. On the other, Officer Hinton mid-rage, lips curled, badge glinting like a weapon. A general was confronted on federal land during a sacred service, and she stood still, the anchor whispered. That stillness, that silence, that's what exposed the rot. TikTok became a courtroom. Instagram became a battlefield. Veterans from every branch started stitching videos with their medals. "You don't lay a hand on a soldier at a burial ground," said one Air Force captain. "Not on my watch." A Navy SEAL in full uniform stood in front of the Pentagon. Steps. "She wore those stars for all of us. You insult her, you insult every drop of blood spilled for this country." The clips got millions of views. But the one that shattered the internet was the youngest voice of all, Caleb's 8-year-old niece, Clara, tearfully asking, "Why did the police arrest my uncle for being kind?" Talk shows couldn't get enough of it. The officer saw a uniform and didn't care, because all he really saw was skin, one host said, gripping her chair. A senator took to the Senate floor. "If a general can't be safe from humiliation during a funeral, then who is?" Even late-night comedians got serious. "This isn't about left or right, it's about right and wrong," said a usually comedic host, eyes sharp behind his glasses. And the wrong here happened loudly, in a place that was supposed to be the quietest. The mayor of the city where the cemetery stood was forced to make a statement. "We are investigating the officer's actions. We take this seriously." But the public didn't wait. They launched their own investigation, digging up Officer Hinton's past like archaeologists of rage, body cam videos, complaint filings, closed-door disciplinary reviews. Turns out, this wasn't his first offense, just the first one he committed, in front of the entire world. Alyssa Monroe hadn't said a word publicly, but that only made her silence more powerful. The silence became the story. Protests bloomed like spring fire. Peaceful, disciplined. Veterans marched alongside civilians, holding signs that read, "Stars deserve respect." Others simply carried photos of Alyssa in uniform. One group gathered. In front of the Capitol, their message simple: sacred grounds should never become battlegrounds. As more footage surfaced, one clip struck deep. A zoomed-in moment where Alyssa, surrounded by chaos, quietly pressed her palm to the flag-covered casket. No words, no anger, just the steady hand of a woman who had endured war and knew what true battle looked like. The Pentagon issued a rare statement. "Major General Alyssa Monroe has our full support. Her service to this country is beyond question." But perhaps the most chilling reaction came from a retired 4-star general, who posted, "If this can happen to Alyssa, it can happen to any of us. The uniform used to mean something. Does it still?" That question lingered across headlines, hashtags, and dinner tables. It wasn't just about one officer or one funeral. It was about how far a society would let disrespect crawl before it finally said, "Enough." The courtroom was tense before anyone even took a seat. Bright fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting sharp shadows on polished wood and glass. Alyssa Monroe entered with steady, deliberate steps, her uniform replaced by a tailored navy blue suit. But her bearing was unmistakable. every inch the leader she had been on the battlefield. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and whispers floated through the crowded room. Yet, the moment she took the stand, a hush fell. This was not just a trial, it was a reckoning. Her lawyer, a sharp and relentless woman named Claire Henderson, spoke first, laying out the facts with icy precision. My client was performing her duties respecting the sanctity of a funeral when she was accosted without cause. The prosecutor fired back, painting Alyssa as overly assertive, a provocateur who disrupted order. But Alyssa's eyes never wavered. She didn't flinch under cross-examination. She stood firm, her voice clear and steady when she finally spoke. I did nothing wrong. I came to honor a fallen soldier, a brother in arms, Alyssa said. I stood silent, as respect demanded. But when I was confronted, when an officer raised his voice and his weapon without cause, I stood my ground. Because silence in the face of injustice is complicity. The courtroom absorbed her words like a wave crashing against a barrier. Some nodded, others shifted uncomfortably, but no one could deny the strength in her conviction. Officer Hinton, the man on trial, took the stand next. His face was tight with anger and defiance, but cracks showed when confronted with his own body cam footage. The judge allowed the jury to see every moment, the slamming hand on the SUV hood, the shouting orders, the pointed gun. The defense claimed stress and confusion, but the jury saw fear, prejudice, and abuse of power writ large. And as the video played, Alyssa's composed gaze never left the screen. Her silence was louder than any words. Outside, the courtroom steps overflowed with supporters, veterans, and ordinary citizens united in purpose. Protesters carried signs reading, "Justice for Alyssa, no more abuse of power." The trial became a national symbol of defiance against systemic injustice. As the judge adjourned for deliberation, the weight of the moment hung in the air. This wasn't just about one officer's fate. It was about whether honor and respect still held meaning in the country's hallowed spaces. The world waited, breath held, for the verdict. The courtroom was silent as the judge's gavel struck, signaling the end of a long, grueling chapter. Alyssa Monroe stood motionless, the weight of weeks of testimony and public scrutiny pressing down like a heavy fog. No cheers erupted, no applause filled the room. Instead, there was a solemn stillness, the kind that marks a reckoning, not celebration. Justice, after all, was not a victory dance. It was a quiet demand for truth, accountability, and change. The verdict was delivered clearly. Guilty on all counts related to abuse of authority and misconduct. Officer Hinton's face drained of color, his mask of defiance finally slipping away. But for Alyssa, the moment wasn't about gloating or relief. It was about acknowledging the scars left by injustice, scars that no courtroom could erase. But that justice might begin to heal. She lowered her eyes briefly, a flicker of raw emotion breaking through her composed exterior. Outside the courthouse, the crowd's mood was complex, a mixture of hope and sober reflection. Families of fallen soldiers, veterans, activists, and everyday citizens gathered quietly, some holding hands, others wiping tears. They knew the battle was far from over. The system that allowed this incident to occur still needed dismantling. Yet for now, there was a fragile sense of closure, born not from applause, but from the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. Alyssa stepped forward, her voice steady but soft, as she addressed those who had followed her journey. "This verdict is not just mine," she said. "It belongs to everyone who has ever been silenced or pushed aside. We must keep pushing, keep fighting. Because honoring sacrifice means protecting dignity for all of us." Her words rippled through the crowd, a call to action and a pledge to never forget. As the sun set behind the courthouse, casting long shadows across the Steps. Alyssa removed her jacket and draped it carefully over the bench beside her. No fanfare marked the end of this fight, only the quiet determination of a woman who stood tall, not just for herself, but for the justice still to come. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe. For more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?